Well, thank you all for coming and thank you for having me. Today is very near and dear to my heart. My whole life purpose was generated by my sister's struggle with mental health illness and the way it was treated. I wasn't very thrilled about that. So I decided to become a neuroscientist in 1989 in Brisbane. Anyway, today is all about the brain, and its piping. Biology, biochemistry, that is our brain. And most of us live like we can't change our brain. And stress really locks up the brain. But none of us know how to tap into our brain power. And our marginalised children and children have a brain that is like really stressed out. We're not allowed to use the word trauma. People find that really difficult to talk about, and that really breaks my heart. So just to start to give you my passion for this, I'm trying to replicate in animals stress and trauma because we absolutely know that if you have a certain amount of it, you end up with addiction, you end up in jail, and you end up in all these situations we currently see, and it gets replicated over generations. I cannot get ethics approval in my animals to do what's been currently done to children right now outside this building. When you sit back and you think about that, how can we let this happen? I cannot get ethics approval to do this in mice and rats. So this is what breaks my heart and what makes me so passionate. We have to change it. It's not working. The system is broken. These kids have nobody. And people are doing the best they can, and they have fully great intention. It all is about the core of the issue. We always put band-aids on all of the things because we don't like to talk about what the core of the issue is. And it's just the brain and how it's being wired by this stress and trauma. And it starts the first minute that neural tube is developing. Okay, as an example, there's one brain that's growing up in a Mozart environment where people are rubbing the belly and playing music and giving it healthy food. And then there's this other kid that the mother's drinking, they're homeless, they don't have anything, they're living in a domestic violence situation. How can you even think that those brains are going to come out differently? You can't. It's impossible. You have to, without understanding that, we can't change anything. It's all about adverse childhood experiences and how it wires your brain. And it's biology, it's circuitry. No matter of talking about that will change it. So, for you, the audience, how did you feel when you woke up today? Is this how you felt about your life? Or is it something more along these lines? Everywhere I go to give this talk around the world, 90% of the audience feels exactly like you do. Then I ask the next question to CEOs of billion-dollar organisations of pitching to investment funds to try and raise money to do this work. And they look at me and then I say to them, so tell me what's happening inside your brain to make you feel stressed out. And they'll just look back at me and say, that's what we do. If you don't understand it, how do you think anyone else is going to understand it? This is like really, really important. We've given our brain out to everyone else and we feel like we have no control of it. And so what you're seeing in these children is an outcome. It's the behaviour that you're looking at, but it's a behaviour for a reason. People drink for a reason. And and I was out doing alcohol research for 25 years, just to let you know, and it's the reason that people are drinking. It's the reason the kids are acting out. Their brain's really clever. It's worked out ways to keep them alive and safe. They're being bad because their brain taught them at home that keeps them safe, as an example. So that's what I hope to leave with you today, is that one message, if I can really get that home. Adverse childhood experiences wire the oldest part of the brain to make the kids feel safe. They act out and do all these different behaviours because the brain's teaching them how to do that. So what I do for my audience, you're sitting here with really great jobs and more or less a good life, but you still feel stressed out. Now put yourself in those children's shoes. They don't have any support, they don't have any protection. And then we ask them to move from home to home and they should still go to school. Often they come in with garbage bags from one place to the next. And then we're saying, why aren't you doing well at school? for example. They can't. Their brain's completely shut down. And I'm hoping that you'll see that for yourself. Can you think clearly when you feel stressed out? No, because the emotional part of your brain shuts down the top rational part of your brain. So you can tell someone what to do, but they don't have the ability to take it in and apply it. Any stressed out brain cannot do that. The top part of the brain can't take in the knowledge and apply it. So for you yourself, do you know what you do when you're stressed out? I can give you many examples where people will, at 5 o'clock, after a really stressful day, they'll go home and immediately think about opening the fridge to have the first beer or a glass of wine. And that just thought of that process relieves the stress of the day. So the brain is always in balance. Stress hormones and reward hormones. That part of the brain is so intimately connected because it keeps the brain alive, because stress and continual stress takes down synapses in the brain. So you can think about this for yourself, and then you can now apply that to people in different situations that are way more stressful than our lives. So the bottom line is it's all about adverse childhood experiences. So I asked you, do you know what your ACE score is? And it's a really simple test to do. It takes a minute, 1 to 0. You get a score of 0 to 10. You should know what all the ACE scores are for your children. If you don't, then you have no idea how stressed out they are. This study has been replicated around the world, and this is Kaiser Permanente in the CDC. And I continually get shocked that no one knows about this. There's hundreds of papers about it. And basically the bottom line and the shocking finding, it actually started as a weight loss study in 1985, but then they reframed it as an adverse childhood experiences study. And it went on to show that a certain ACE score leads to disrupted brain development and then the follow-on consequences. I'm just going to share a little bit because I don't have much time, but I'd love to tell you more about it. And when you start to understand this, then everything kind of becomes crystal clear. So what did they do? These are people that 75% of this cohort actually went to college. So what we're talking about here is somewhat healthy people. This didn't even look at people that are marginalised, like in Richmond and other areas. This is all done in California. And so they're very basic questions, but I want to just share with you some of those to give you an idea. This is a brain image to demonstrate how trauma disrupts brain development. And where things are going to really change for all of us is that brain imaging and neuroscience are finally getting enough technology where we can come and show you this thing inside our skull, which we normally can't see, and bring it out and show you what's happening. When you look at that image, you get just horrified. And this is extreme neglect, I will tell you that. But there's more and more studies coming out to demonstrate even a small adverse childhood experience, which most of us in this room have experienced at some level, cause changes in our brain and make us do things like drink alcohol when we're older, or get addicted to sugar, as an example, or not exercise, etc. So, here's a particular example. Some of you have probably been through some of these questions, but basically you can go online. There's a lot of resources to do this. It's really simple. But you can see the questions. It's not like something that's really huge, but this leads to an adverse childhood experience score of 1. Now let's move to a child with their first placement. You can read the question: before your 18th birthday, was a biological parent lost to you through divorce, abandonment, or some other reason? Then we move to 2 or more placements, and you ask questions like: no one in your family loves you, supports you, you don't feel safe. So then we move to other sorts of trauma that are happening through all these different placements, and you know more than I do exactly how much trauma these kids are exposed to. They've got ACE scores of 8 to 10 plus for sure. And what do I mean by that? Well, in that cohort that's been these studies have been replicated around the world. Basically, a score is a really great predictor of whether you're going to get alcoholism later in life. That's just a 4 plus. Most of these children that you guys are looking after have at least 8 to 10 for sure. We now know that IV drug use in women is 80% of that is related to adverse childhood experiences. I'm just going to go through this quickly, and to relieve you of some of the trauma, turn to each other and have a smile. Smile at each other, turn to each other and smile. People can't do it. Where do we come in our life where smiling to your neighbour is a terrible thing to do? Oh no, I'm going to run out of time. So anyway, I'll flip through these studies. There's many studies to demonstrate that adverse childhood experiences is 100% predictive for psychosis. We now know that the common brain area, which is an executive function part of the brain, is shut down from trauma. Executive function is up in the rational part of your brain, very important for short-term decisions, long-range planning. So there's no way you can set a goal or a plan in place when you've had any kind of extreme stress or trauma. That part of the brain is just not working. Oh, I don't have time for that. I know, do I? No. But the fantastic thing, that's the bad news, but the good news is, and this is the hardest message for me to ever drive, which I don't understand why, so people are so resistant to this information. When I was developing drugs for mental health, I spent my life as a pharmacist really believing I could target that damn protein. Once I get the right protein and develop that drug, I'm going to solve schizophrenia, I'm going to solve alcohol addiction. And then one day, anyway, long story short, brain plasticity means that we can tap into brain power. We can redrive some of these circuits, some of these lost synapses from the stress and trauma. If we don't do that, nothing will change. And you're going to say to me, there are people, we've got great examples of people that did, but that's because they either had some very significant support around them, they end up in that Mozart environment, they end up with a teacher that loved them, etc., etc. We can do this for anyone. It's the more trauma, the harder it is and the longer it takes. Brain plasticity. Don't you want to be like that and not living your life like this? And that's you that have healthy lives mostly. When we talk, that's why kids end up in jail. That's why they end up in resi care. And they're no longer cute and cuddly after they reach teenager life. So that's when they get thrown out too. And that's when their trauma really starts to come. But that's the opportune time for brain plasticity, is 10 to 14. We have a new epigenetic period of brain development that we can tap into. 0 to 3 is really difficult. And trauma through 0 to 3 really wires the brain heavily, because the brain, that part of the brain, really gets wired for stress and trauma, more than pleasure and happiness. But we have this really fantastic opportunity to do this and help to make a little bit of a difference in their lives. And this is what neuroplasticity means. And it's the constant brain, and it's not something that's easy to do, and it's not something that happens overnight. And that's part of the problem, because I guess we want short-term solutions and we don't like to stick it out. But these kids that have significant trauma, we need at least 1 year to 2 years. And we have some interesting results that show that they get, even if it's not a cure or solution, it certainly makes a big difference. And it's not talking, it's brain-based exercises to rebuild those synapses that have been lost in the executive function part of the brain. You can just sit there and do a computer game and will do nothing, because you still have to train back the emotional part of the brain that's been totally super activated from all of the stress. And I like to put this up because basically people think that they're too old, they're stuck with who they are. But the bottom line is that brain plasticity, they actually lasts forever. And you now hear people riding bikes at 105 and other things like that. Men bodybuilding because they got sick of their decrepit old body at 89. And then they're now winning races around the world. So brain plasticity is something that you can tap into for the rest of your life. Not every brain's the same. That's why in a set of children, you'll get some that'll do well and some that won't. Because the amount of stress and trauma that they've experienced, even within one family, can be very different. And that level of genetic and epigenetic activity on those circuits between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex are different between different people. Even in this room, each of us completely have different ACE scores. So I wrote the book because I got upset that no one seemed to care about this and that it really matters. And I really care about these poor children, and it felt like no one was doing anything for the kids. But then we discovered that as we tried to do something, the adults didn't really understand it because they'd never done this either. So we had to go back. I'm trying to write the book because if you don't know how your brain works, how can you help other kids that are really traumatized? And so I've illustrated the book. I've made it really simple. It doesn't have many words because I discovered people don't like to read anymore. That's what they told me over the 3 years I've been out in the circuit. Trying to help people get this information so they can apply it to their own life. Because if you can't do it for your life, how do you expect to help kids that are traumatized? And the whole idea, this is bringing Australian into the picture here, is that it is just an animal. That's the cats and the cucumber videos to show you how old this part of the brain is, and I'm running out of time. But I just want to say that, and this is a really important message, it is easier to strengthen children, and it's harder to fix broken adults. But you can, but it takes much harder work. But the bottom line is, right now we tend to have a lot of broken adults trying to help and strengthen children. But if we don't help ourselves first, it's very difficult to help the children. And if I can get that message to you, you can have as many workers around these kids, but we have to be able to actually get the resources to the children that are desperate. So this is the book I wrote for that purpose, and thank you very much for having me.